Okay, I'm Mike Bible, and I was master of Alexandria-Washington Lodge in 1999 and in 2017. I'm a native Alexandrian. I was born at the corner of Duke and Washington Street, and I've lived my whole life here in Alexandria. I went to Hayfield High School, which is just down the road on Telegraph, and I was a sheriff for 36 years, raised 3 girls right here in Alexandria, and I found Masonry in 1995. So my Masonic journey started probably before 1995. My stepfather is a past master of George C. Whiting, which is in Georgetown. They've since merged with Potomac number 5. So I knew a lot about Masonry because of his influence, and I have always admired this building. My godmother lives at the very foot of this hill, and so I grew up seeing this building. Was always a part of my life. Alexandrians that weren't Masons knew this building as the Masonic Temple. We know it as the Memorial, but Alexandrians know it as the Masonic Temple. So it's always been a part of my life. I've always had a curiosity, and I've flirted with the idea of joining many times over the years, but I never did it. But in 1995, I met John Rank, who was a past master of this lodge. We belonged to the Elks Club together, and I have to say that he convinced me that this is what I needed to do, and so I made that move in 1995. So I was master in 1999, and that was a very significant year for this lodge because it commemorated the 200th anniversary of Washington's death. And our lodge in 1799 was responsible for the funeral. We did all the Masonic ritual that goes with the funeral. We were a major part of the activities of that day, and that would have been December the 18th, 1799. In 1999, we reenacted that funeral. All the original funeral implements that we have in our archives that were used in 1799 were brought out in 1999, and they were there for the 200th commemoration of the funeral. It was a big event. It was 3 years in the planning, and I was intimately involved all 3 years in working with Mount Vernon and costume designers and people from Hollywood that came and helped us with the production. The History Channel was here. C-SPAN filmed it live. Roger Mudd commentated on the events as they were happening, and there were several hundred, I couldn't even tell you how many. There's several hundred people that were there live to watch the event. It was a big deal. I guess there was probably easily over 100 people that were involved. You know, the local Revolutionary War reenactors were involved. They were in costume, and it was a wonderful thing. That was my big event. So the rest of the year is driven, as it usually is in AW, by candidates. And back then we had business meetings twice a month. We had stateds almost every week where we would work with candidates, raising, passing, initiating candidates. So it was a busy time. And then fraternal visits, which was a big part of Masonry. We would go over to Potomac Lodge in Georgetown, which we had a fraternal relationship with, Fredericksburg number 4 down in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and then all the local lodges here in our district. So we were always busy. And then, you know, your officer meetings and other activities, and it's a busy time. So what have I done after my year as master? So when I was in line and working up the line to become master, I was a sheriff, and my job worked with me and kept me on day shift for that period of time. But after my year in the East as master, they said, Mike, it's time to go back to shift work. So I had to go back to shift work. So I had to take a back seat to all of Masonry for a while. And so I did, but later on in my career, you know, I ended up back on day work and was able to get back involved, and I did. George Washington was the greatest American that has ever lived. There's no doubt about it. We would not be the republic we are today if it wasn't for George Washington. Was George Washington a perfect man? No, by no means. He had many flaws, but he was one of the greatest men, one of the greatest Americans that ever lived. And he was associated with this lodge because he joined it as an Alexandrian. He joined this lodge in the 1780s, and when we first got the Grand Lodge of Virginia didn't exist when the founding fathers of our lodge were looking to create a lodge near Alexandria. They had to go to Pennsylvania because there was no Grand Lodge of Virginia. So they got what was called a warrant, which allowed them to hold meetings here in Alexandria. In the interim, a few years later, the Grand Lodge of Virginia was established, and we wanted to be a part of that. So we applied for a charter, and in 1788 we received that charter. Washington was a member of our lodge, and we wanted to honor Washington, and we asked him to be the founding master of this lodge under the Virginia Charter. So he has quite a relationship with this lodge. We have many letters corresponding between the lodge and Washington. We have a long history with Washington and his family. After Washington passed in 1799, the executor of his will, George Washington Parke Custis, and Martha Washington made sure that we received several of his Masonic possessions and other possessions also, which make up the bulk of our archives. So that relationship was very close, and we treasure those treasures that we received from the Washington family and have them and display them. That's the reason for this memorial where we're at today. This memorial was built to warehouse and to display all these possessions that we came in possession of from George Washington. How has Washington's legacy impacted me as a Mason? Washington was a true Mason, inside and out. He lived it. He took on the virtues and the characteristics that Masonry teaches, and he adopted those in his own life. And that is why he was such a virtuous and man of integrity. And he was known for that. Even during his lifetime, he was known as somebody who was of high character, and people really respected him. I believe he was that way because of Masonry. Masonry taught him those virtues, and he took them seriously and he lived by them. And that has impacted me because as I look at Washington, I see the type of person I want to be. And so he's had a great impact on my life. And being a native of Alexandria, you're totally exposed to Washington when you're growing up. I mean, there's just so much history here, and Washington's a big part of it. So he's always been somebody who I've admired and somebody who I've actually even studied and have a high regard for. One of the unique aspects of Alexandria-Washington that I treasure, I guess there's several. We have great tradition. We're known for being a very traditional lodge, and we're also known for a lot of the activities that we do that we've done forever. We've laid a wreath at Washington's tomb since commemorating his death since 1799, and we've done it every year since. That's a great tradition, and I'm always amazed at traditions that go back so far, and they're very important to this lodge in particular, but also locally to all the Masonic community, because a lot of them participate in that, and it's meaningful. And we actually go down and go inside the tomb. They open up the doors and we go inside and lay the wreath, and that's a very special thing. This lodge is very unique from other lodges to me because of the history and ties to this city. When the founding fathers of Alexandria established, it was always a seaport, but it was never a city until in the mid-1700s. And those same founding fathers of the city wanted a Masonic lodge here. So this lodge has been a part of the city probably more than anything else in this city. It's been here since the very beginning. And mayors and businessmen and clergy, they've all been a part and members of this lodge over the years. So it's hard to separate Alexandria-Washington Lodge from the city of Alexandria. They're one and the same. Who has been my biggest Masonic influence? So I've had several, and for several different reasons. The first was my stepfather, who I mentioned before, who was a past master of a lodge locally, and he influenced me in becoming interested. Certainly George Washington was a major influence on me and one of my Masonic heroes. But there's one special guy that meant a lot to me and who was a mentor to me, and that was Godfrey Pierpont Rinaldo, who was the master of this lodge in 1950. He was someone that I spent a lot of time with. We got to know each other. He lived right down the road from me. As he got older and it was hard for him to drive to lodge, I would pick him up for lodge meetings and bring him. And we went to baseball games together. He's been to my house for dinner. So we had this great relationship. And he was, in a lot of ways, like George Washington. He had these virtues. He was a man of character and integrity, and you could see that, and I respected that, and so I learned a lot from him, and so he was definitely one of my Masonic heroes. What is my favorite Masonic memory? There's so many, and I'm not just saying that. There really are some very special moments, but I got to say that some of my most precious memories, Masonic memories, was when my wife and I would take a trip to visit our sister lodges in England, and we had a relationship with a lodge in France for a while, and we went there. And that was so special because it really drove home to me how international Masonry is. When we were in England and in France, they knew you and treated you as a brother because you were a brother. So although in France we were separated by our language and it was hard to communicate, we were able to, but it was difficult, still that bond was there between two brothers. It's hard to explain, but it transcends, geography, and it was really something. And to see the different cultures and experience that with my wife, that was very special. And those Masons in England and France came and visited us. And of course we extended the same hospitality. And I think they felt the same way when they were here. And that tradition with England, Beverly Lodge, continues to this day. And it's something very special. So those are some of my favorite memories. I would say my favorite degree is probably the third degree because of the dramatic and impactful symbolism that comes with that degree. And I won't say anything more about it, but to me it's a spiritual thing, very impactful. It to me personally, it touches my Christian beliefs, and I would say that's my favorite degree. I remember it vividly. I do. Right here in this room, and it was on a Saturday, and it was me and another gentleman. And that year, it was 1995, man, we raised a lot of people. And in the following year, I know that we initiated 50 people in 1996. So we did degrees whatever days we could do them, you know, sometimes twice a week if we needed to stay ahead of it. But it was a very meaningful experience. Even as it was all new, it's like drinking out of a fire hose, but as you sit in the degrees, you pick up a lot of what you miss initially. But it was a moving experience, and I remember it vividly. Yeah. So over the last 25 years, we have witnessed a decline in the membership. Sometime right after World War II, Masonry, there was a lot of people that came to Masonry and joined Masonry. A lot of people in the war found a brotherhood, you know, with the guy they were sitting in a trench with, or sitting on a ship with. And there was that brotherhood. And when they came home, they wanted that type of relationship. So I think that's why so many people joined Masonry after World War II. Well, all those guys now are in their 90s, if they're still around. So we lost a lot of members over the last 25 years. But I think that was just because we had such a major influx of members during the 40s and 50s that we experienced that. I don't think that's a commentary on Masonry or the attraction of Masonry to people who aren't Masons. Matter of fact, I was district deputy a couple years ago, and part of my responsibility was to direct people who were interested in Masonry to lodges. And I'm guessing that I had probably 40 or 50 people, probably 50 people that I dealt with that were interested in Masonry. So there is an interest for it with young folk, and they're looking for something, and Masonry is what they're looking for because it teaches values, and it's you know, you have to believe in God to be a Mason, and those people have that spiritual connection that do believe in God. They're looking to further that journey. They want to learn how to be a better person, a better man, a better father, a better husband. Masonry teaches that, and so there is a desire for folks to get involved, and so I'm very encouraged about the future. I think we're going to be fine. We're not imploding or falling away. That's not the case at all. I'm very excited about the future for Masonry. I'm even more excited about the future for this lodge as I see the young men and others that have come through, their excitement, their dedication, the type of people that they are. I am blown away, and our lodge is in great hands. We have one of the strongest lines since I've been here right now, and so I'm totally encouraged about the future of Alexandria-Washington Lodge. So the question is, what have I learned, lessons that I've learned I'd like to pass on to other Masons? And my answer would be to continue the knowledge. That you'll never learn all there is to learn, but there is a lot to learn. And I've been in Masonry 25 years, and I'm learning today and will for the rest of my life. And but you need to pursue that. You need to pursue that knowledge. One of the things I didn't do, and I didn't do it because of my work schedule, I didn't get involved with some of the appendant bodies early on. I did join the Scottish Rite, but the York Rite I didn't join. Some of the other bodies I didn't join. I just didn't have the time. I was raising a family. I was working shift work. I regret that. I regret that. Having the opportunity to have joined those bodies and being a member and being active now, I regret that. So my advice to young Masons would be join the Blue Lodge, learn what you can in the Blue Lodge for a year, 18 months, but then join the other bodies, because the degrees in Blue Lodge, first 3 degrees, tell a story. The appendant bodies tell the rest of the story, and you really need to learn it. You really need to see it. And it's been one of the most enjoyable rewarding things that I've done. I wish I would have done it sooner. So my advice to young Masons would be join those bodies. Give yourself a little bit of time, but then get involved with those other bodies because it's important. I will say that the world, I'll say that the lodge has never needed good men more than now, and the world has never needed Masonry more than now. So we need to work on that, and we need to be cognizant of that, and we need, like the church, we need to go out and spread the message of Masonry and bring good men in and make them better men. So there's a couple other things I wanted to mention that I think is significant. And we talked about the uniqueness of this lodge. This is one of the few lodges that I know of that's had so many important men in history visit and attend some of the events and activities. Going back, of course, to George Washington, but the Marquis de Lafayette was a member of this lodge, one of the greatest men in history. I don't think we would have won the Revolutionary War without the assistance of the Marquis de Lafayette and France. But he was a member of this lodge, loved this lodge, had a house right down here on South St. Asaph Street, which is now called the Lafayette House. And others, Truman, in 1950, one of his Secret Service agents, and by the way, Truman was a past Grand Master of Missouri, but one of his Secret Service agents petitioned this lodge, and Truman wanted to be here to raise him. So in 1950, Harry Truman was in this lodge and raised his Secret Service agent here in this lodge room. It was the only time, they say, in the history of the Secret Service that the Secret Service allowed a president to be with a group of people without their presence. Because they weren't Masons, they weren't allowed in the lodge room, and they had an objection, and Truman said, "I'm safer in here with my brethren than I am out there with you." So that's really something. That's history in the making there. William Taft was in our lodge when we met down on Market Street a couple times. And I can't tell you the event, it's documented somewhere, but he visited our lodge, I believe, twice, and they're in our minutes. Gerald Ford was here at the memorial. He wasn't in the lodge for a lodge event, but he was here at the memorial. All these brethren I'm mentioning are Masons. They're all brethren. So that's real significant. I mean, most lodges can't say that, and it's because of the reputation of Alexandria-Washington Lodge that was able to happen.